Hello everyone. Uh, this is gonna be my basic kind of tutorial, but not really. Just my video about the very basics of Blender. I'm Aneta. You probably know me if you're watching this. Okay, so first thing you'll probably notice is when you first open Blender, I'm actually just gonna exit out and open Blender. You'll see this splash screen appear. Now, if you just click off of it, it'll go away. Now you'll notice that my Blender looks a little bit different. Like instead of the uh, timeline, instead of having the timeline down here like this, I have the asset browser open. And but everything else is the same in the layout tab. I have some of the other tabs a little bit customized too, but I probably won't go into that. All right. Uh, when you first open Blender, you'll probably have a cube, a light, and a camera in your scene. If you just box select all of that, then hit X and then press delete, or if you just box select it all and hit the delete key, that stuff will go away. And you also, if you hit 1 on your numpad, it'll go to front view, and that's how I have mine set for by default is the front view. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is go through some settings that I have changed from the defaults and some add-ons I have activated. All right, so if you go to Edit on the top left and down to Preferences at the bottom of the menu, go to Interface. I don't think I actually have anything changed here, but if you want, you can change your resolution scale and make your, like if your text is too small to read, you can change your resolution scale. I highly recommend messing with that if you're having any issues reading the text. Under themes, you can change like colors of stuff, like all of these colors on the screen that you see, like pretty much all of the colors of everything in the entire program. I don't have that. I have these on defaults. Under viewport, I don't think I have anything changed. Under lights, nothing. Editing, nothing. Animation, I don't have anything changed. Under add-ons, I have two add-ons mainly that I want to talk about. So under Edit Preferences Add-ons, if you go to the search bar and hit Node, type in Node, and turn on Node Wrangler. Now the reason I say you should turn this on is because a lot of people who are doing tutorials have this activated and use it in their tutorials. It's kind of one of those ones you just want to use because everyone uses it. Now if you get rid of Node and type in Modifier, I also have the add-on Modifier Tools turned on. That one we'll actually be using. Now under Input, I have Default to Advanced Numeric Input typed in, or I mean activated, which means like, say, this is the 3D cursor right here. And if I click on my viewport and hit in to open the properties menu, now if I go to the view tab and go down to 3D cursor, now you can see it says 0, 0, 0 for the position. So it's at the origin. Now if I type in like 2, it'll go to 2 on the x-axis. Now if I hit 1 times 2, it'll go to 2. Now the reason you can type in like 1.5 times 2, it'll go to 3. That's because I have default to advanced numeric input turned on. You can actually put in math and it'll do the math like a calculator. All right, now I'm going to hit in and go back to my preferences. Now, emulate 3-button mouse is what you'll want to use if you're using a touchpad or a tablet instead of a 3-button mouse. And I'm not going to go into how to use that, but yeah. Under navigation, I have orbit around selection turned on, which I think just makes more sense. Like if I go in here and add a cube and rotate and orbit my view, it orbits around that cube. If I have another cube and have it selected, it'll orbit around it. If I have that selected, it'll orbit around it. And I have zoom to mouse position zoom to mouse position means literally what it sounds like. Whenever you zoom with your mouse wheel, it'll go to wherever your mouse is. So I definitely recommend having that turned on. And under key map, I have tab for pie menu turned on, which means if I go back to my 3D viewport and I hit tab, it's a pie menu. By default, tab just goes between object mode and edit mode. But I have the pie menu turned on, so I have this entire menu. I can just go over to object mode or go over to edit mode. And yeah. I also have the spacebar action changed from play the animation to search because I find that's much more useful. Now, if I go to the viewport and hit the spacebar, it'll search through pretty much every command. I usually end up doing stuff to do with the cursor in the search bar. But yeah, that might be it for everything I have changed. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's everything I have changed in my preferences. All right, so I'm going to hit 1 on my numpad. To go to the front view, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to hit the A button, the A key, and hit X and delete everything. A selects all. Like if I have nothing selected, I hit A. That selects everything. If I double click A, it deselects everything. So I'm going to hit A, hit X, and delete everything. All right. So first off, I'm going to hit Control Z. I'm going to hit Shift A and go to Mesh. This is most of the time what you'll be using to add things. You can see this is the add menu. Shift A for add. Meshes are just models. Like mesh is just another word for model. All right, and add a cube. And I'm not really going to do much with that cube. I'm just going to... All right, so first off, if you hit 1 on your numpad, it'll go to your front view. I keep using my mouse wheel to zoom in and out, by the way. If you hit 7 on your numpad, it'll go to the top view. And if you hit 3 on your numpad, it'll go to the right view. Now, if you hold down Control and hit any of those, it'll do the opposite, like 1 front, Control 1 back. 3 right, Control 3 left. 7 top, Control 7 bottom. And then if you hold down your middle mouse button, you need a 3-button mouse. If you hold down your middle mouse button, after going to the front view, if you hold down your middle mouse button, it'll rotate your view. And it should orbit around your selection if you change your settings like I said. Now if you hit period, it'll focus on what you have selected. If you hit period on the numpad, it'll focus on what you have selected. Like if you have somehow moved to some weird place on in your viewport area where you have no idea where your stuff that you're working on is, and you don't have anything selected. If you go to your outliner right here, and I'll click on the cube, and then if I hit period, it'll focus on it. All right. Now, if you hold down Shift and use your middle mouse button, it'll pan the view, it'll move it, and yeah, that's it. All right, so this menu over here, move, rotate, scale, transform. Transform just brings up all of the widgets. Scale widget, rotate widget, move widget. I never actually use any of this. I never actually click on any of these. I would have an object selected, hit G to move, hit R to rotate, and hit S to scale. And then hit Control Z a bunch of times. All right. Now, if you hit G, for instance, and then hit X, it'll move it on your X axis. X is like left and right. And then if you hit G and then hit Y, it'll go to your Y axis. And then if I hit Z, it'll go to my Z axis, up and down. Now, if I hit Shift Z, it'll move on everything but the Z axis. So basically, it'll move parallel to the ground plane. And if you hit escape, it'll just undo all that. Now, if I hit R and hit X, if I hit R and then hit X, it'll rotate on the X axis. Now, if I hit Z, it'll rotate on the Z axis. And if I hit Y, it'll rotate on the Y axis. Now if I hit S, if I hit escape, if I hit S, and then if I hit Shift Z, it'll scale on everything but the Z axis. So you can see it's getting, I guess, fatter, but it's not getting taller or shorter because Z axis is up and down. Now if I hit X, it'll scale on the X axis. Now an interesting thing is I'm actually gonna hit R twice, which makes it so that you rotate it like a trackball. Normally when you rotate it, it rotates parallel to your view, if that makes sense. But when you hit R twice, it rotates like a trackball. You kind of have to try it out to know what I mean. And I'm gonna rotate it a bunch. So you can tell now it's no longer parallel with the ground and such. Now, if I hit G and Z, it'll go up and down. But if I hit G and then I hit Z twice, it'll, instead of, like if I hit G and Z, this is the global Z axis. G and X, this is the global X axis. But since it's rotated, if I hit G and ZZ, this is the cube's local Z axis. Every object has a local X, Y, and Z axis. Now if I hit X and X, it'll move on the local X axis. And as you can see, these local axes are like go along with the rotation of the object. All right, now I'm gonna hit Control Z until it's back to normal. Okay, I'm gonna look at my notes, navigating, okay. Okay, all right, I'm actually gonna hit Tab. Okay, for one thing, look at this up here. It says Object Mode. Now, if I hold down Tab and go to Edit Mode with my mouse, now we're in Edit Mode. Those are your main two modes. And you'll notice that everything is selected. Now, if I double click A, it'll unselect everything. If I hit A, it'll select everything. Now, when I say it'll select everything, I mean everything of this one mesh. When we're in edit mode, we can only mess with one mesh. And you can see these points that you can select. That's because you're in vertex select mode. These points, these corners, are called vertices. This is a vertex. These two are vertices. Now, the way this works is, if you have one selected and you hold down Shift, you can select more. If you select all four, it'll actually show you that you have the entire face selected. Now, if you hit 2 on the top of your keyboard, not on your numpad, if you hit 2, and click off of everything to deselect, and then you can select edges. Now, if you hit 3, then you can select faces. All right, so like I said, select one, then hold down Shift to select the others. Now, if I keep holding down Shift and click on these, I can actually deselect them. So I just deselected everything. All right. Now, the cool thing about edit mode is that everything you can do in object mode with the moving around and such, you can do in edit mode. Like if I hit 2 on the top of my keyboard and select an edge, and I hit S to scale, I can make that edge smaller. If I hit S0, it'll actually disappear. Now, sorry. If I go to vertex select mode and move this vertex, you can see these are still two vertices. But if I select all and then go in and hit spacebar and search for merge by distance. It used to be called remove doubles. Merge by distance. Now if I go into the menu here, a lot of times when you do things, when you do actions in the viewport, this little menu will appear. I'm going to open that. Merge by distance, 0.0001 meters. Okay. I mean, that's fine. Now if I try to select this and move it, it's all one vertex. All right. So, yeah. Now if I go into face select mode and I select a face, I can scale it, I can move it on the Z axis, G and Z, and then I can move it on the ground plane with G and Shift Z. And I'm actually going to select this face, just click on it, and I'm going to hit I, and that's called insetting. And I'm going to hit E to extrude, and I'm going to extrude upwards. I'm going to rotate my view, and I'm going to inset that face, that inside face, until I have this. Now I'm going to hit E again and extrude outwards. Okay, and I'm going to go to edge select mode up here, or you can hit 2 on the top of your keyboard. And I'm going to hit Control Z actually a bunch of times until everything is back to normal. And go back to edit mode. Okay, it looks like everything is back to normal. Everything is back to default with the cube mesh. I could have just deleted it and added a new cube, but I didn't. And I'm going to hit 2 on the top of my keyboard. And I'm going to hit Control Alt. Actually, I'm going to hit Control R. And as you can see, this yellow edge loop has appeared. That's called an edge loop. And if I click, left click, and then I can place the edge loop. So I'm just going to place it up here. And then I'm going to hit Control R and place one across these edges. And I'm going to use my mouse wheel and increase the number of them and put 3, and then just right click, or like click, left click and right click to just place them, like left click and then move it, and then just right click to leave it in the default position. Okay. And I'm going to hit Control Z a bunch of times until it's all back to normal. Go back to edit mode, hit 2 on the top of my keyboard again, hit Control Alt, and select this ring of edges. Now, this is an edge loop. Control Alt. This is an edge ring, if that makes sense. Now I'm going to hit Control B to bevel. As you can see, this kind of rounds out the edge. It cuts through it this way. But if you go up, if you hit up on your mouse wheel or roll up on your mouse wheel, it'll actually add more segments, is what that's called, and it'll kind of round out the bevel. But I'm actually going to mouse wheel down until it's just one. And I'm going to select all and hit S and Z. That's a little too tall. I'm going to hit S and Z. Oh, and the thing about insetting is, so I'm going to inset this, and I'm going to hit X and delete faces. Now, if I go to edge select and select this edge loop, this entire polygon that's empty, not a face, just an empty polygon. If I hit I to inset, it doesn't do anything. Now, if I hit E then S, it extrudes and then scales. Oh, so if I hit extrude and then hit Z to extrude it upwards, it does like that. But if I hit extrude with hit E and then right click, nothing happened. Right? Wrong. It's still there. That's doubled geometry on top of itself. So if you do that and then hit S, you can kind of inset it even though there's no actual face there. So if it's faster to just hit E then hit S immediately. And yeah. Now if I hit E and then S and then 0, it'll scale it until there's nothing. And if I just hit, now if I just box select it so that I'm making sure I select all of the vertices on top of each other that are right here, and I hit M and merge at center. Well, actually, I'm going to show you what it's like before I merged it. Now, if I select this vertex and move it, as you can see, there's still a vertex here. There's actually like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's actually 8 vertices all stacked on top of each other here because of when I... Okay, so E to extrude, S, and as you can see, there's an entire polygon there. So 8 vertices, and I hit 0 to scale it down to nothing. And so there's 8 vertices on top of each other here. So if I hit 1 on top of the keyboard and box select so that I have all of these selected, and then hit M to merge, and then hit at center, it'll actually, that's weird. Actually, let me go into wireframe and do this. Okay, now merges center. Now it's all one vertex, or one vertex. If I hit G and Z, I can move that up and have a little pyramid in the middle of this shape. It's funny, I pretty much have a cylinder now, even though I started with a cube. Okay, so I'm actually going to go into object mode. I still have this selected, so I'm going to hit X and delete it. And now I'm going to hit Shift A. And under mesh, you can see that there's a plane, which is just a four-sided, it's just a square. Now, when I say it's a square, you can actually rotate like RY90, RY90, and bam, it's rotated 90 degrees on the x-axis. And like if I were to go into edit mode and then edge select mode with 2 on the top of the keyboard, select this edge, hit E and Shift Y so that it's moving on everything but the y-axis. Hit E, Shift Y, EZ, and now and then GZ. Now I kind of have a little house shape or something. Basically, you can start with a plane and make all kinds of stuff. Like you can literally start with a plane and make like a face just by like extruding more planes off of it. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to go to object mode and delete this. And I'm just going to show you, this is a circle. As you can see, it's not filled. Now, if you go to fill type over here, this little menu that appears, if you go to fill type and hit Ingon, it'll make an Ingon. An Ingon is just a many-sided polygon. A quad is a four-sided polygon, and a tri or triangle is a three-sided polygon. Kind of like in math class. But yeah, I'm just going to say nothing. And now if you mess with the vertices, like I'll go down to 16, and I'll actually go down to 8. Now it's an octagon instead of a circle. Or I mean, even this with 32, it looks like a circle, but really it has defined edges. Like if I can mess with the radius, I can mess with the rotation. I can mess with the rotation. And if I hold down tab and go into edit mode, as you can see, this is made up of discrete edges. Okay, so I'm going to go back into object mode, hit X and delete that. Shift A, add a mesh. UV sphere, go into my wireframe. As you can see, a UV sphere is made up of quads, except that the top and bottom, it converges to a point with a bunch of triangles. Okay. Oh yeah, I hit Z to do that. Hold down Z and go to solid, and it's like that. That's the default. Hold down Z and go to wireframe, and that's wireframe. The important thing about wireframe, if I go to edit mode and go into my front view, see if I'm in solid mode and I deselect, and then I go to vertex select mode, and I'm going to select everything to the right of the middle and hit X and delete, or I mean hit X and delete vertices. Now, as you can see, it didn't delete everything on the right. It only deleted everything I could see. Now I'm going to hit Control Z, go to my front view again with 1 on the numpad, go to wireframe with Z, and select everything to the left, and delete vertices. Now, if I look around, you can see I actually deleted everything to the left. Basically, wireframe lets you select through the object, like that, okay? And there's actually this button up here called X-ray that kind of gives you like an in-between solid and wireframe, and you can do the same thing. You can select through the object. Whether you want to use wireframe or X-ray is up to you. But yeah, now I'm going to go back to object mode, hit X and delete that. And there's several other shapes. I'm actually going to do the cylinder. Vertices, I'm going to bring it up to 64. Now if I can zoom in, you can still see the separate segments of the cylinder. But if I right click while I have it selected and hit shade smooth, now it looks kind of messed up. But if I go to the object data properties down here, this tab with the triangle, the green triangle with the points, and go to normals and hit auto smooth, now the the normals between the sides are smoothed, like the sides are now blending together, but the top and bottom are now discrete in terms of the shading. You can tell they're separate. Now with all mode turned off, everything kind of just blends together, and that's not what we want. Now if I select this, turn auto smooth off, and go back to flat shaded, so there's this thing called normals. A normal is basically the direction a face, like this circle, is facing. It's a line perpendicular to that face, like this. Like the normal of this side would be like this, and the normal of this side would be like this. The normal of the side over here would be like this. Now, when you shade smooth, you kind of make it so that it's almost like the normal right here kind of blends into the normal right here. It's almost like the normal right here, instead of being like this, is actually like this, and like this, and like this, according to the lighting. But if you turn on auto smooth for the normals, it changes the normals so that anything with an angle greater than 30 degrees, like this 90-degree angle between the circle and the side, that normal is not, those normals are not smoothed. This circle gets its own discrete normal, whereas these sides normals are all blended together. I hope that makes sense. It'll make more sense when we talk about normal maps, or if you learn about normal maps. I'm not going to talk about them in this video, but yeah. Okay, now I'm going to talk about modifiers. Okay, I'm going to delete this cylinder. I'm going to hit Shift A and add a cube. And I'm actually going to drag this cube into this collection. A collection is kind of like a folder in Photoshop, if that makes sense. Like, I'm actually going to add a cylinder and hit S, Z to make it taller, and then hit S, Shift Z to make it thinner, and then hit G, Shift Z to move it parallel to the ground plane. Now I'm going to go into edit mode, hit Shift D to duplicate, and then it'll automatically go into grab mode. Hit Shift Z, move it parallel to the ground plane, and just move it over here. Now, since I duplicated that in edit mode, it'll all count as the same object. Cylinder and cube. As you can see, there's only 2 objects, even though this looks like 3 objects. Okay, now I'm actually going to move the cylinders into a new collection called color objects. That'll make sense in a second. And I'm actually going to cut these cylinder shapes out of this cube shape. I'm going to do that by selecting the cube, adding a modifier, and going to Boolean. Boolean is basically used for cutting objects out of other objects. You can also, like, that's called difference. So I'm going to use the eyedropper for object and click on the cylinder. Now you can't see that anything has been changed yet, but if I turn my color objects off, you can see that they've actually cut 2 holes through the cube. Now if I click on the cube and go to edit mode, you won't be able to see that. I'll explain that in a minute. But basically the actual geometry of the cube hasn't been affected in terms of the edit mode mesh. Now in object mode, you can see that you can see the Boolean being applied. Now if I bring back these cylinders, make them visible again, and move them, and then I make them invisible again, you can see that these holes have moved. And if I go to edit mode on the cube again, they're gone again. And I'm actually going to hit X on this Boolean modifier. And I'm going to, well actually no. I'm going to go to the drop down menu on this Boolean modifier and hit apply. Now if I go in edit mode on the cube, these are actually part of the geometry, and the only way I can edit these cuts from this point on is by modifying the actual geometry. Like if I make these visible again and move them, if I make the color objects visible again and then move them, and then make them invisible again, there's no holes there. That's because I applied the Boolean modifier and it is now part of the geometry. Okay, so I'm going to go to object mode, I'm going to make everything visible, and I'm going to delete everything. Now I'm going to add a cube, a new cube, and I'm going to add a new modifier, bevel. Now bevel, what it does is it takes every edge. It's kind of like the auto smooth thing with the 30-degree angle. By default, the bevel tool, the bevel modifier, also uses an angle of 30 degrees. So every edge that has an angle between its faces of greater than 30 degrees, so like these 90-degree angles, are beveled, which means they are rounded out. Now with one segment, I'll go to wireframe, with one segment, it's just a flat cut through the edge. With two segments, I'll go back to solid, it rounds it out. And if I right click and hit shade smooth, you can see it looks pretty good. And like I can change the amount to make the bevel wider or thinner. Beveling is very important because nothing in real life, except for maybe a knife's edge, has a perfect sharp angle. Everything, pretty much everything that's in real life has rounded corners, especially like wooden tables, objects like that, wooden chairs. Yeah, most of them have, definitely pretty much everything but a knife has slightly rounded angles. So beveling is very important. Bevel everything basically. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm just going to hit the X on that modifier to get rid of it. I'm going to go back to shading flat. And I'm going to add modifier. I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. Now, subdivision surface, it has, the level is set to 1. This is also called subsurf. So the subsurf modifier, it basically takes your geometry and adds an extra vertex in between each vertex. So like this face becomes 4 faces and they're all rounded out. So it kind of turns into a sphere. And I'm going to actually turn up the levels to 2, which does that even more. And if I go to edit mode, as you can see, the actual cage of the geometry, and if I make it so that you can't even see it in edit mode, and then I move this vertex, and then I make it, and then I go back to object mode, now if I, in edit mode, actually make it so you can see it in edit mode, you're kind of just distorting this ball object because the actual geometry is a cube, but the subsurf modifier geometry is a sphere that you're kind of distorting by moving the vertices. I'm going to hit Control Z, and I'm actually going to go back to object mode, and I'm going to hit the drop down menu right here and hit apply, and now I'll go to edit mode, and the actual geometry has been changed. Okay, I don't think now a couple more things about edit mode and modifiers. Okay, so if I have a vertex selected and I hit G, it'll actually slide that vertex along its edges. Very useful. And if I keep doing it until it goes to another vertex and then select, go into wireframe so I can select both of them, go back to solid, now hit M and merge at center. Now that is 1. It was probably easier to go like this until it's like that, and then going to merge by distance, remove 0, okay. That didn't work. Why didn't that work? That's weird. Okay. Whatever, that might be a bug, because merge by distance is supposed to, you know, merge by distance. I don't know why that didn't work. Okay, so if I hit 2 on top of the keyboard and I select I'm just going to pick a random edge. Okay, now if I hit GG, it'll slide that edge along its faces. And if I hit Alt and select an edge loop and hit GG, it'll slide the entire edge loop. Now if I make a few edge loops in here, now if I select this edge loop right here and hit Alt S, it'll shrink or fatten it, which means it basically just moves it along the normals. And you can use this, like I can Alt S, and you can use this kind of round things out, if that makes sense. Or to just pinch in something like that. Okay, and I'm gonna actually go back into object mode and front view with 1 on the numpad and hit X and delete that. Add a cube, hit Control 2, which automatically adds a subsurf modifier with a level of 2. I'm going to hit Apply All, which I have available because of the Modifier Tools add-on I mentioned at the very beginning. It just applies all the modifiers to the actual geometry. I'm going to go into Edit mode. I'm going to hit 1 on top of the keyboard. I'm just going to click outside of everything to deselect all. Now I'm going to go into wireframe mode, and I'm going to select everything to the right, everything to the left of the center, and I'm going to X to delete vertices. I'm going to go into object mode, go back into solid, and I'm going to add modifier and mirror. Modifiers are under this tab with the wrench or spanner, by the way. Alright, and you can see that after I added a mirror modifier, suddenly the sphere is complete again. And if I go into edit mode, you'll see that everything I do on one side mirrors to the other. This is very useful because you can basically just edit one side of an object that is symmetrical, like the rough draft of a face, or a lot of man-made objects are symmetrical, so this is very useful, and you can make it mirrored on the X, Y, or Z axis. Usually I use the X. You can use a mirror object. I won't explain that. Oh, if I move that away, it'll make a hole. But if I hit clipping, the points in the middle will stick to the middle. They will stick and you won't be able to move them away. And that's very useful because you usually don't want these to be able to make, you usually want this to stay together, not to make holes in the geometry. Okay. Alright, now object mode, I'm going to hit apply on the mirror modifier. Now if I go into edit mode, this geometry is selectable again, and you can edit things on one side without it affecting the other. And yeah, usually in the end you will end up applying your modifiers, but like for instance with a sphere with everything on the right deleted and a mirror modifier added, solid. Oh, one thing that's important in edit mode, if I hit O, that'll actually turn on proportional editing. I'm going to turn on clipping on the mirror modifier. Proportional editing, and that kind of makes it so that there's a fall off and all of the geometry close by to what you have selected will also move the same way. And you can use your mouse wheel to change the fall off, make it bigger or smaller. And yeah, this is mirrored. And you can change the fall off to be like smooth, sphere, root. Usually I only use smooth or inverse square. Random could be interesting because it's like everything around it moves randomly in the same direction, a random amount in the same direction. But I'm actually going to hit O again and turn that off. Turn off proportional editing. But yeah, proportional editing, I'm actually going to, well, no. Okay, so the cool thing about like modifiers is that they're non-destructive, by which I mean, I'm not sure how to explain that actually, but anyway, So normally in the end you would end up applying all of your modifiers. Like I'll actually add a boolean, I'll add a cylinder, I'll add a cube, and the boolean will be difference type, and it'll be on the cube. And I'll move the cube to the color objects collection. I'll turn that invisible. And as you can see, there is now a cut, a cube. The cube is now cutting through this object. Normally, in the end, you would end up applying all of these modifiers. But if you want to go back and edit the modifiers, like move around this cube, oh, I have both of them selected, move around this cube to cut through it somewhere else, like that, or to go back to editing the geometry back when it was symmetrical, you want to basically hit, like, I'll hit Shift D. Oh, I'll actually turn on the color object too. Shift D. Okay, so yeah, I have these copied, and I'm gonna hide the color objects again. But yeah, now I have these copied so that I have a copy of it with the modifiers, with the original modifiers, so I can edit that again. Whereas here, I'm going to hit apply all, and now if I go into edit mode, the geometry has actually been applied. Okay, I hope that made sense. I hope that was useful. Hope I didn't sound totally stupid. Okay, I think that is about it. So for this video, I'm going to look at my notes and see if I missed anything. No, I didn't. Okay. All right. So that's it. Thank you.